Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Phillies Talk. It's the longest-running independent show talking about the Philadelphia Phillies on the internet, on podcast form. The show started way back. I had to count because I have a special guest on later in the show. He's been podcasting for 10 years. I had to count how many years Phillies Talk has been on now, and it started off in 2006. So 11 strong years of Phillies Talk. It did start out as a show called Philly Sports Talk Now many moons ago, where we talked about the Phillies, the Sixers, the Flyers, and the Eagles. We covered all four sports. About 9 months to a year later, we decided to just narrow it down to baseball. It was very difficult to go year-round with the four sport seasons as they overlap one another and things like that. But anyway, a little bit later on in the show, we'll be joined by the Phillies' upcoming opponent, that being, of course, the Atlanta Braves. And the great news is the Phillies finally won a series. Wow, it's great to be able to say that. They were threatening to tie a record back set in 1941 this afternoon. If they lost to the Giants, they would have tied this record where they would have lost 11 series in a row. And that's when you know you're really going bad, when you tie records like that. Phillies pulled this game out of their back pocket almost. It wasn't easy. They used two late home runs, one by Michael Franco, and then Freddie Galvis had one of his own very late in the game to break up a 7-7 tie in Philadelphia between the Giants and the Phillies. And wow, it's just so great to see them win. And now they have a 2-game winning streak after not being able to win several games in a few weeks, let alone 2 days. So the Phillies now very far away from turning it around, obviously. They just won their 19th game this afternoon. They're 35 losses still. And the Giants weren't much better, to be honest with you. They came into Sunday's game with a 22-34 record. Now, the Giants really have a lot more talented players than the Phillies do. So you can see baseball really doesn't discriminate. Even if you have a lot of highly paid free agents, big salaries, things like that, you can still play terribly. And the Giants are proving that this year. It's supposed to be one of those odd years, isn't it, where the Giants do well? Everybody was jumping on their bandwagon earlier preseason before the season even started, saying, oh, yeah, it's 17, so that means the Giants should be back. And their pitching has practically deserted them. So Giants handing over a series win to the Phillies this afternoon on Sunday when I'm doing this podcast, and the Phillies jump back in a plane and head down to Atlanta. So strange scheduling there. The Phillies had went down to Miami for a few games in the middle of a homestand, and then popped right back up to Philadelphia for a few games, and now they're heading back out on the road. So hopefully this doesn't hurt them too bad. I mean, they can't get hurt much worse the way they've been playing. But maybe this winning will be contagious for them, because you could almost see when Michael Franco hit his home run, then you got a guy like Freddie Galvis. He wants to get up there and hit one. So hitting is definitely contagious. I believe winning is contagious with a baseball team, especially in major leagues. And losing is contagious. You stand around a bunch of guys that aren't doing much, that are grounding out, flying out. Your pitcher's giving up 6-7 runs in a game in 4 or 5 innings, and you're down by 7 runs. It's very contagious as well. It's bad to be around, and maybe the Phillies have shaken some of that bad stuff away from them here as we've entered the month of June. They already have 2 wins for the month of June. They're 2-1 so far before they start their 4-game series down in Atlanta. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I'm going to be talking with Steve Epstein from the Atlanta Baseball Talk program. It's a great podcast, independent, just like Phillies Talk. And I'm going to talk to him about the Braves, how they've been doing. And, of course, a guy that we're all familiar with up here, Ryan Howard. Wouldn't that have been nice to see him down in Atlanta on this series, and I could just imagine it. It would probably be a hoot for everybody involved, but of course the Braves let Ryan Howard go after only a few weeks down in the minors. I mean, they didn't really give him a full chance, I thought, but they didn't really like what they saw, and Steve will be talking to us a little bit later in the show as well, how the Braves probably came upon the decision to cut him loose, and then just days after that, of course, Freddie Freeman ended up with an injury, arguably one of the best players on the Braves. But they did go out and get themselves a quality replacement for Freeman, and we'll talk all about that in just a couple of minutes on the program here. Well, Jeremy Hellickson made another start for the Phillies today. He did not earn the win due to the back-and-forth nature of this game. Phillies were up by a few runs. They couldn't hold the lead. The game got tied up late in the game, so Hellickson didn't get to win this, but he did keep them in the game, so thank goodness for that at least. Phillies playing their 54th game of the season here, and they've lost 35 games. That's almost hard to believe, and it's really tough to say for this team. I thought they would be a little bit better than this, but obviously maybe not. Again, when we're talking to Steve from Atlanta Baseball Talk, he'll be talking a little bit about how the Braves have been rebuilding, and they still are in a state of rebuild, and I think he gives us a good tip on maybe what the Phillies should lean on doing maybe next year. Maybe it doesn't involve as much offense as we would think. Maybe it involves starting pitching. So right now I'm going to take a brief break in the program. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Phillies, and then we'll talk with Steve from Atlanta Baseball Talk right after this message.
Sponsor an ad on the Phillies Talk podcast. Support our show and let people know about your business. Email us today. Follow us on Twitter at Fightin' Phillies or on our website, fightinphillies.com.
Hi, this is Farley.
And Mark from Baseball PhD.
Thanks for listening to BaseballPodcast.net.
Up next, another great episode of Phillies Talk.
Hi, this is Gary Matthews. You're listening to Fightin' Phillies Talk Podcast.
Brewtown Sports is your source for Brewers news and notes. Join Mr. Brewtown as he keeps you up to date on all the happenings of your Milwaukee Brewers and Major League Baseball. Follow the show on Facebook and Twitter, Brewtown Sports. Listen 24/7 at brewtownsports.podomatic.com.
The Braves and the Phillies face off 19 times a year, and we don't like each other. But the podcast community certainly does. Atlanta Baseball Talk and the Phillies Talk podcast. Listen to them both.
Hi, this is Gary Mack of Mets Musing, and you're listening to my good friend Rich Baxter on Phillies Talk, right here on BaseballTalkRadio.com, the home of great baseball talk shows.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking Phillies baseball on the Phillies Talk podcast, and today's win was a good, solid victory for the Phillies. They need some reinforcement. Freddie Galvis homering from both sides of the plate, one of several players to do that for the Phillies, Steve Jeltz being one of them, and a couple of others. A lot of shortstops have been able to do that for some reason. I guess they think they're home run hitting machines at times. But the Phillies now, currently as we stand, before they head down to Atlanta, 19 wins, 35 losses. That's a .352 winning percentage. They're a full 15 games back behind the Washington Nationals, who are 34-20. Phillies, as I said, they have a 2-game winning streak going for themselves. And they just need to salvage this season at this point. I don't think you're going to see them rise up in the rankings unless something really changes with this team. New York Mets are right above them. They're 10.5 games back with a 24-31 record. They've been taking a serious elevator down lately. Miami just passed them. They're practically in a dead heat for near the bottom with Philadelphia. So the NL East has its problems if you're a Northeast baseball fan. Washington, then the Atlanta Braves moved up into second place. They're 10 games back, but they're riding a 2-game winning streak as well, and they're about to welcome in the Philadelphia Phillies. So they're probably hoping to themselves that they could beat up on the Phils like a few teams have over the past month. We'll have to see what happens with this Phillies team, which one is going to show up. Of course, they had some injuries with the starting pitching rotation. Nick Pivetta is supposed to be coming back to the Phillies. He'll probably be starting the game down there in Atlanta against a familiar name to us from the Braves. Big Sexy is starting the first game, and I really hate when the Phillies play him because somehow he gets the Phillies number when they play him. When he was with the Mets, they couldn't handle him. He just seems to know the Phillies' mannerisms at the plate, so we'll have to see if he turns it around as well. He's got a 6.99 ERA for the Atlanta Braves this year, and there's talk on how much longer the Braves can stay with Bartolo Colon pitching like that. Of course, they're not really in the running for a playoff spot either. But look, they've rised up from the middle of the rankings of the NL East, and they're already in second place. So you just never know if a team can turn things around. Maybe they replace Colon with somebody halfway decent, and they run a 6 or 8 game winning streak. Things can change pretty fast, especially when the season is still fairly young. I don't think they're going to change that fast for the Phillies, even if they were to reel off 6 or 7 victories. That would be great. That's exactly what they need for their confidence and, of course, for the fans' confidence. It's been a very tough time around the Philadelphia tri-state area in the past week. Just a lot of losing, a lot of finger pointing, people pointing at Pete Mackanin, pointing at GM, at the Phillies GM, Matt Klentak, and he retorted that he's not going to fire Mackanin. He's not going to lose his pitching coach, Bob McClure, over this. So he's in it for the long run, he basically said. I mean, I think the Phillies could have lost 110 games this year, and Klentak would have stuck by Mackanin, I believe. I don't think he's going anywhere no matter what happens with this Phillies team. In fact, he was talking about the Phillies maybe picking up the first-round pick in next year's draft because of this horrible showing so far. So he wasn't very upset. I'm sure he was disappointed with the way this team has played, but he was looking at other avenues that the Phillies could possibly capitalize with and getting that first-round pick or number 1 pick the way the Phillies have been playing. But we'll see if that holds out for the rest of the season with them. Of course, it can't get that much worse, I wouldn't think, knock on wood. You just never know. But the Phillies heading down to Atlanta, and let's go down and talk to Steve from Atlanta Baseball Talk. And I'd like to give a big Phillies Talk welcome to Steve from Atlanta Baseball Talk Podcast. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great, Rich. How are you?
So great to talk to you after so many years. I've been a big fan of Atlanta Baseball Talk. I know they've been on baseballtalkradio.com for years, and you guys do an excellent job. You have 3 hosts, yourself, Hamilton, which they call Hammy, and Curtis as well. Why don't you tell our listeners over at Phillies Talk Podcast how the podcast started and how you guys developed Atlanta Baseball Talk?
Yeah, well, really simply about 10 years ago, it was in the middle of the 2007 season. I started looking for a Braves podcast because when you live in the South, sports talk radio is 97% about college football and the NFL and very little about baseball. And there wasn't really much in that space here. And so we decided to start it. Ham and I have been friends for a long time, since the early 90s. And Ham and Kurt went to high school together, and the three of us got together, and we've been doing it ever since.
That's excellent. Where can we find you on the web besides baseballtalkradio.com? You guys obviously have great marketing tools with Twitter and Facebook. Where can we locate you on the web?
Sure. You can always find us at our website, atlantabaseballtalk.com, and we are also on iTunes, on Stitcher, and Google Music.
That's excellent. So the Braves, in my memory, being a younger fan, growing up around the Philadelphia area, they've practically owned the NL East for some 15 to 20 years there in the early 90s through the late 80s. And now, of course, the Phillies and the Braves are on sort of a rebuild mode, and they've been in that rebuild mode for a couple years now.
Yes, it's true. The Braves, they haven't been to the playoffs in many years. They tore it all down 2 years ago, and in a very short amount of time have taken what was a bottom third farm system to a consensus number one farm system in baseball. And, that started with getting rid of Justin Upton and Craig Kimbrell and Evan Gattis. And, the front office, led by John Capalella, who's the GM, along with John Hart, who had come in after they got rid of Frank Wren, who was the GM for many years after John Sherholtz, the guy who had put together all, the big run in the 90s. In a very short amount of time, like I said, they really just broke it all down and have turned the farm system into, the prize of the major leagues. But, it is the majority pitching. And those guys are a couple years away, so it's still kind of lean right now in the majors.
Yeah, and of course, from Philly fans' perspectives, we remember the Smalts, the Glavins, that sort of rotation. That's been one of your Achilles' heels so far in the last couple of years, I think, is getting that rotation back together, and then the Braves seem to fill out around that. But talk a little bit about the current Braves rotation. I know you have Bartolo Colon, and the Phillies will face him in the first game of the series. No pitcher set for the Phillies yet for Game 1 as of the time we're doing this podcast. But Bartolo Colon, he's like the Energizer Bunny of pitchers and baseball players all of a sudden.
Yeah, the front office, knowing that the pitching prospects were still a couple years away. They did not want to experience what the Braves experienced last year, which was a lot of guys from AAA filling in, not ready, getting killed, and then by extension killing the bullpen because the starters were not going long. They went out and signed 3 veterans to fill in that rotation. So they signed Bartolo, like you said, R.A. Dickey, as well as Jaime Garcia. They actually traded for Jaime Garcia from the Cardinals. And Bartolo has been a real disappointment. I mean, everybody loves Bartolo, big sexy. He was hugely popular with the Mets. The Atlanta fan base was very excited for the Bartolo Colon era here. And he has been, without hyperbole, one of the worst starting pitchers in the major leagues this year. I mean, by ERA, by WHIP, by batting average against, Bartolo has just been awful. So it's not clear really how much longer Bartolo is going to last. I mean, the Braves signed him to a $12 million one-year deal, so he's a good 10% of the payroll. So the front office is certainly reticent to get rid of him, but they can't keep sending him out there if he continues to pitch like this.
Yeah, well, he generally has a good way with the Phillies. Somehow the Phillies just can't hit him, so maybe that'll be a turnaround for him there. And, of course, we faced Edison Volquez last week. He was 0 for 7 on the year, and I think he hadn't won a game in 16 games, but he beat the Phillies a week ago. Now he pitched a no-hitter, so if that gives
amazing.
any confidence for down the road. I know the Phillies, as you said, I think you stated the best problem of the Phillies in the last couple years. They have not done that. They have not gone out and got themselves a marquee pitcher or two. They did grab Hellickson, but he hasn't been the real deal for the Phillies, so to speak. I think if the Phillies could model themselves after the Braves a little bit, the way they did with going out with that pitching, they would be a much better team. But so far we've had a tough season, as well as the Braves. The Braves are sitting right now at 23-30, but of course the Phillies are even worse. They're at the bottom of the basement of the whole Major League Baseball. So both teams continuing to rebuild. And what the Atlanta Braves did is build themselves a new stadium. How's that going for them down there in the suburbs of Atlanta?
Yeah, aside from the fact that I hated the move and think that it is small thinking to leave downtown and move out to the suburbs, that aside, we could talk for hours on that. That aside, the stadium is beautiful. They have created retail and restaurant all around it. Things that have like naturally happened right in Chicago and Boston. It's all kind of prefab in how they created it, but it's very nicely done. The stadium's beautiful. It's about 42,000. It is very intimate in that there's very little foul territory. The rake of the upper levels is very steep, so you're really on top of the action. It's similar to the Twins Stadium, which I just happened to go on a business trip once, and I couldn't believe how bright and small and close to the action you were compared to Turner Field, which was sort of dark and cavernous and really not the best stadium. So I think they did a great job. They at least if you're going to do that and tear the city away, tear the team away from the heart of the city and put it out in the suburbs with no mass transit headed there, at least do a good job with the stadium, and they certainly did that.
Yeah, and you sort of said that right, tear it away from the city, which they sort of took a piece, the heart out of Atlanta and transplanted it, put it up 20 miles plus from where the stadium was. It would almost be like the Phillies, and I've said this a few times on the Phillies Talk podcast, almost be like the Phillies taking Citizens Bank Park and saying, okay, we're going to move it to Bucks County, which is a good 20, 25-minute ride, much more with traffic. But, they just carved themselves a niche up there off of a major highway and said, okay, this is where we're moving. And I found it hard to believe that the city of Atlanta didn't do more to try to keep all of that income and all of those people closer to the heartbeat of the city, so to speak, and downtown, which, to me, a baseball team that represents the city should be somewhat closer than this current ballpark. I could be wrong on that, but, you're going to call yourself the Atlanta Braves, be in the city confines of the city, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. And look, in reality, they moved about 9 miles. However, it's a completely different world. I mean, it is truly a suburb of Atlanta. Like I said, there's no mass transit solution up there. You're driving up the highway. Back to your comment about the city not doing more. The city looked at it as having a choice, because at the same time that all this stuff with the Braves and the very, very secretive behind the covers negotiations going on with Cobb County, where the Braves got a ton of money from Cobb County to move up there. The city of Atlanta was also dealing with the Atlanta Falcons and the new stadium that's set to open up this fall. And the mayor of Atlanta looked at it as there was a choice to be made, and he basically chose the Falcons over Atlanta to put some money up and, partner with. And so the Braves sort of lost out. The Braves, the Turner Field was the 1996 Olympic Stadium, built with the fact, with the knowledge in mind that it would be retrofitted into a baseball stadium after, but it was not in the best part of downtown. It was surrounded. It was an island in the middle of miles and miles of parking lots. that the team did not own. So that was a big revenue piece that they could not take advantage of. There were a number of reasons why, given the fact that they were getting all that money from Cobb County and then could own everything, every piece of it, including all the retail and restaurants all around it, they, because it's always about money. At the end of the day, it was all about money, and they could make more money with this move, and that's why it happened.
Yeah, they bought the whole pie, so to speak, and can keep the whole pie. So, yeah, I can understand that a little bit. Still must be tough for Atlanta Braves fans that live downtown. They could take a bus or a train or however they had to get to the stadium, a quick walk from their home maybe in the metro area. So it's got to be tough for them. Any sense on the attendance so far? And the Braves' home games, has it gone up? Is it selling out with the new stadium?
So it's certainly up compared to last year in Turner Field, but I would imagine, if they were being totally honest, the front office would tell you they were looking for more. On the weekends, they're doing close to sellouts. On the weekdays, and now Atlanta schools just got out last week, so we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But they were averaging like 21, 23 on weekdays, which surely the front office was looking for more in this inaugural season.
Yeah, I know the Phillies have had a rough season so far. They had 32,000 in the stadium yesterday, so the Phillies fans are grumbling and griping about the season, but so far, as you said, some of the schools are getting out. It's getting better weather up here in the Northeast, so people are still going to games and they're still supporting their teams in the sense of the Phillies, and I hope it's the same down there in Atlanta. Well, the Braves actually picked up a Phillies icon and sent him down to the minors in the last month or 6 weeks or so. Ryan Howard, the Braves signed him to a minor league contract, a very brief one. Can you talk a little bit about his short stay with the Atlanta Braves minor team?
Yeah, I mean, the Braves knew coming out of spring training that the bench was a real weakness, and there was no power threat coming off the bench either. So I'm pretty sure it was the first week of April, so just a day or two after the season started, the Braves announced that they had signed Ryan Howard to a minor league deal, very low risk deal. There was no promise of being on the 25-man roster, and so he had a few days in extended spring training down in Florida, and then joined the AAA club in Gwinnett, another suburb of Atlanta, and he did very little. I mean, really, he hit one homer. Literally the rest of his hits were singles. He had very few walks. And, I saw the video of his home run, and it was kind of painful to watch him run around the bases. Like, he clearly was in a lot of discomfort, couldn't move well. So the fact that he wasn't moving well and really didn't hit, the Ryan Howard experiment lasted for about 3 weeks, and then they released him.
Yeah, that was a tough call for him, I'm sure. He really played well in Atlanta for what it was worth. I know they're
he did. Yeah.
They're not at the same stadium anymore, but he really seemed to prefer it down there. And, I don't know if Atlanta Braves management really scouted him that good, because he's a warm weather player. He never did well in April and May with the Phillies. He's just not a cold weather player. But when those summer months heat up, and especially the humidity and heat down there in Atlanta, I think he would have really excelled. I think maybe they should have given him a little more time. I know they expected him to probably burst onto the scene and become this home running hitting machine, but and that never developed early. But I just kind of wish they would have waited a little longer with him.
Yeah, and look, who knows what they saw or what the conversations were in Gwinnett. I think the fact that he hasn't been able to hit left-handed pitching in years. I mean, even his relatively decent numbers last year, right? He hit a good number of home runs last year. His splits were pretty bad. So I think that the ceiling was not that high to begin with Ryan Howard at this point. And they just must not have liked what they saw and decided it wasn't worth investing the roster spot on the AAA club.
Yeah, it's a tough break for him, of course, and I would have loved to have seen him come up to the Braves and play some of the Phillies games. That would have been
it would have been fun.
That would have been a surreal moment for Phillies fans to see Ryan Howard come up to the plate in this series with the Braves here. But we unfortunately won't get a chance to see that. But the Braves did pick up a nice substitute for him, that in Matt Adams, and I'm very surprised that they were able to grab him.
Yeah, some of the things I've read in the St. Louis papers is that really the Cardinals front office did him a favor by accepting this deal, because they knew he was blocked and they obviously liked him and they wanted to give him an opportunity, because now the fact that he's playing every day for these 10 weeks that Freddie Freeman is out, he will either be able to remain with the Braves as a bench player or parlay it into something else with another team. He has afforded himself very well with the Braves so far. He had a 2-homer game on Saturday this weekend in Cincinnati and one of those being a game winner in extra innings. He had his first grand slam with the Braves this weekend. I mean, he's been quite good. There's no replacing Freddie Freeman, who really was sort of bursting onto the scene this year, particularly as one of the best hitters in baseball. But, Matt Adams is much more than a warm body, and it's been great to have him.
Yes, indeed. And I have some audio of those home runs. He hit a long grand slam, as you said, game winner for the Atlanta Braves. And let's listen to the audio here for a moment.
Deep drive to center field. It is long gone. Absolutely crushed by Matt Adams. And that breaks the seal for Atlanta in a big way. A grand slam home run. He goes opposite field with power. This one's got a chance. It is gone. Second homer of the ball game. Matt Adams, where you been?
So there's Matt Adams and his Atlanta Brave couple of home runs there. That'll get you a nice welcome in town.
Yeah, for sure. And he, his first game or two, he struck out pretty much every at bat. It was looking a little rough. And then he just started hitting, and he's been very consistent since. It's been great.
Yes, it has been. Well, the Phillies and the Atlanta Braves square off in a 4-game series coming up here. And the Braves will put on the mound, as you said, Big Sexy. He hasn't been very good for the Braves, almost a 7.0 ERA here as we're sitting, 6.99. But it looks like we're going to miss Julio Teheran. That's a good thing, but we're going to face R.A. Dickey, and the Phillies just can't seem to hit him. How's he been doing this year?
Yeah, Dickey has, for one thing, Dickey has not been the innings eater that we had hoped he would be to take some pressure off the bullpen. I think he's hit 7 innings twice, and he's more 5 1/3. And he gives up 4 or 5 runs a game. I mean, he's been about 1 earned run worse than his last couple years. So he's been fair. I mean, that's really the best I can tell you.
Yeah, it seems like the Braves have a lot of good free agents. Matt Kemp, of course, in the twilight of his career. And you acquired Nick Markakis from the Orioles. How's he been playing this year?
Markakis has been great. I mean, Markakis has been steady, still hitting all his doubles, not as many home runs as we would have liked. He's actually stuck on 1 home run this deep into the season already. But Markakis is great. Above average defense in right field, and the guy just hits. He's been terrific.
That's awesome. Well, I wish the Braves well this year, and I hope, of course, the Phillies can manage to win a series. They haven't won a series now in 11 straight games. They go for that dubious honor this afternoon to see if they can't break that 10-game series losing streak up. So we'll have to see what happens in this Braves series. Any final words on the podcast here about the Braves?
The Braves are about 2 years away, I would say. I really think 2019 is when this treasure trove of pitching that we have in the minors will be here in full force. And I think they'll be a force to reckon with in a couple years. But this year, I doubt they sniff 500. Next year, maybe will be a 500 year, but 2019 could really get going.
Steve from Atlanta Baseball Talk, thank you for joining us on Phillies Talk Podcast. And I'll be listening to all of the shows there at Atlanta Baseball Talk.
Thanks for having me, Rich.